I never thought I'd be standing in my own kitchen, staring at a piece of paper that would change everything. The deed in my hands was yellowed with age, but the words were crystal clear. This property belongs to Harold Johnson and his heirs, with Harold Johnson retaining primary residency rights in perpetuity. My daughters had just told me to stay out of their lives 3 hours ago. They had no idea what they just unleashed. Let me back up and tell you how I got here, because this story didn't start with legal documents and property rights. It started 37 years ago when I was a young father who thought love alone could build a family. My name is Harold Johnson, and I raised 2 daughters as a single parent after my wife Patricia died in a car accident when the girls were just 8 and 10 years old. Sarah was the oldest, always trying to be the responsible one, while Emma was my little firecracker, full of energy and dreams. I worked double shifts at the manufacturing plant, came home exhausted every night, but I never missed a school play, a soccer game, or a bedtime story. I bought our house in 1987 with Patricia's life insurance money and my savings. It wasn't much. A modest 3-bedroom colonial on Maple Street, but it was ours. I remember the girls running through those empty rooms on moving day, their laughter echoing off the bare walls. Sarah claimed the room with the window seat, and Emma wanted the one closest to mine because she was afraid of thunderstorms. For years, that house was filled with the chaos of raising 2 girls alone. I learned to braid hair by watching YouTube videos, figured out the difference between concealer and foundation when Sarah hit high school, and somehow managed to teach them both to drive without having a heart attack. Every room held memories. Emma's science projects exploding in the kitchen, Sarah's first heartbreak crying sessions in the living room, graduation parties in the backyard. I sacrificed everything for those girls. When Sarah wanted to go to law school, I took out a second mortgage. When Emma decided she wanted to start her own graphic design business, I emptied my retirement account to help her get started. I wore the same 3 shirts to work for 2 years so they could have new clothes for college. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day so they could have the meal plans they wanted. And you know what? I was happy to do it. That's what fathers do. We sacrifice, we provide, we build something bigger than ourselves. I thought I was building a legacy of love and family togetherness. The first crack in that foundation appeared about 5 years ago when Sarah got married to David. Nice enough guy, I suppose, but he had opinions about everything, especially about how I ran my life. Suddenly, my parenting choices from decades ago were being scrutinized. The way I disciplined them, the traditions we'd kept, the values I tried to instill. Everything was up for debate. "Dad, you can't just drop by unannounced anymore," Sarah told me one Sunday when I brought over groceries like I had every week for years. "David and I need our space." Space. That word started appearing in our conversations more and more. Sarah needed space to build her marriage. Emma needed space to focus on her business. They both needed space to find themselves as adults. I gave them space. I called before visiting. I asked permission to help with things I'd been handling for decades. I bit my tongue when David made snide comments about my old-fashioned ways or when Emma started canceling our monthly dinners because she was too busy. But I kept showing up. When Sarah's furnace broke down last winter, I was there with my toolbox. When Emma's business hit a rough patch, I helped her restructure her loans. When David's mother had surgery, I drove Sarah to the hospital every day for 2 weeks because David was traveling for work. I thought that's what family meant. I thought we were in this together. The second crack appeared when Emma started dating Marcus about 2 years ago. Suddenly, she had a whole new perspective on family dynamics, courtesy of her boyfriend who'd studied psychology for 1 semester in college. According to Marcus, I was emotionally dependent on my daughters and needed to establish healthier boundaries. "Dad, you can't keep treating us like we're still children," Emma told me over coffee one morning. "We're adults now. We have our own lives. More space. More boundaries. More distance between us." I started noticing things I'd ignored before. The way Sarah would glance at David when I told a story they'd heard before. The way Emma would check her phone constantly when we were together. The way both of them seemed relieved when our visits ended. But I kept trying. I kept showing up, kept offering help, kept being the father I'd always been. Because what else could I do? These were my daughters, my whole world. I'd built my entire identity around being their dad. The third crack became a chasm 3 months ago when I had my heart attack. Not a major one, thank God. but scary enough to land me in the hospital for 4 days. You'd think something like that would bring a family closer together, right? Sarah visited once, stayed for 20 minutes, and spent most of it on a work call. Emma came by on day 3, brought me a get-well card that was clearly picked up at the hospital gift shop, and left after 15 minutes because she had a client meeting. Lying in that hospital bed, I realized I was completely alone. All those years of sacrifice, all that love I'd poured into raising them, and when I needed them most, they had better things to do. The discharge nurse asked if someone would be staying with me for the first few days. I lied and said yes. I went home to an empty house and spent a week learning to take care of myself while recovering from a heart attack. Neither daughter called to check on me. That's when I started seeing our relationship differently. I wasn't their beloved father anymore. I was an obligation. A responsibility they wished they could check off their list and move on from. The fourth crack, the one that nearly broke me, happened 6 weeks ago. Emma was having problems with her business again. Cash flow issues, client disputes, the usual entrepreneurial struggles. She called me, not to ask how I was doing, but to ask for money. Again. Dad, I know you've helped me before, but this is different. This is about my future. I'd helped her 6 times in the past 3 years. Emptied what was left of my savings, sold my truck and bought a cheaper used car. Even pawned my father's watch. The only thing I had left of him. Honey, I wish I could help, but I just don't have it right now. The medical bills from my heart attack and my reduced hours at work. She cut me off. Dad, this is important. This isn't just about me. It's about my entire career. I understand that, Emma, but you know what? Forget it. I should have known better than to ask. You've never really supported my dreams anyway. That stung. After everything I'd sacrificed for her dreams, after all the money I'd given her, after all the times I'd believed in her when no one else would. That's not fair, Emma. You know how much I've. Whatever, Dad. I'll figure it out myself. I always do. She hung up on me. She actually hung up on me. 2 weeks later, I found out from a neighbor that Emma had gotten the money she needed. From Marcus's parents. Apparently, they were real investors who understood business. Unlike her father, who was just throwing good money after bad. That's when something inside me started to shift. I began to see the pattern clearly. I was good enough to bail them out, good enough to fix their problems, good enough to be their safety net. But I wasn't good enough to be their priority. The 5th crack happened just 3 weeks ago. Sarah called me on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual because she usually texted if she needed something. Dad, David and I have been talking, and we think it might be time for you to consider moving into a senior community. I was 68, not 98. I was still working part-time, still maintaining my house, still living independently despite my health scare. I'm not ready for that, Sarah. I'm doing fine in my own home. But Dad, what if you have another heart attack? What if you fall? David found this really nice place about an hour away. They have activities and medical staff on site. An hour away. Far enough that dropping by unannounced wouldn't be possible. Far enough that being a regular part of their lives wouldn't be an option. I appreciate the concern, but I'm staying in my house. Dad, you're being stubborn. We're just thinking about what's best for you. What's best for me? Or what's most convenient for them? The house is paid off, Sarah. It's where your mother and I built our life, where I raised you girls. I'm not leaving. There was a long pause. Then David's voice in the background. Tell him about the maintenance costs. Dad, David makes a good point. The house is old and you're spending too much on repairs. Wouldn't it make more sense to sell it and use that money for a nice retirement community? They'd thought this through. They'd made plans for my life without consulting me. I said no, Sarah. Fine. But don't expect us to drop everything every time you need help with the house. That was rich, considering I hadn't asked them for help with the house in over a year. I'd been hiring professionals for repairs rather than burden my busy daughters. The 6th and final crack happened yesterday, and it shattered everything. I was at Sarah's house for what I thought was a family dinner. Just the 4 of us, Sarah, David, Emma, and me. I'd brought dessert like always, and was looking forward to a nice evening together. It had been weeks since we'd all been in the same room. Halfway through dinner, David cleared his throat in that way he did when he was about to make an announcement. Harold, we wanted to talk to you about something. Harold. Not Dad. Not even Mr. Johnson. Harold. Sarah and Emma have been discussing this, and we all agree it's time to have an honest conversation about boundaries. Emma was staring at her plate. Sarah was nodding along with whatever script they'd prepared. "We love you, Dad," Sarah started, and I knew immediately that whatever came next was going to hurt. "But we need you to understand that we're adults now with our own families and responsibilities." "I understand that. Let me finish," she said, and her tone was sharper than I'd ever heard her use with me. "We need you to stop inserting yourself into our lives without being asked." Inserting myself? I was their father. David leaned forward. "What Sarah means is that we need clearer boundaries about when and how you're involved in our decisions." "What decisions?" I asked, genuinely confused. Emma finally looked up. "Dad, you still treat us like we're children. You offer advice we don't want, you try to solve problems we haven't asked you to solve, and you assume you're entitled to know everything about our lives." Entitled? To know about my daughter's lives? Can you give me an example? I asked. Sarah and Emma exchanged a look. "Last month when I was having issues with my contractor," Sarah said, "you called him directly to discuss the situation." I remembered that. She'd been frustrated because the guy wasn't returning her calls about delays in her kitchen renovation. I'd simply called to get some answers for her. I was trying to help. "But I didn't ask for help," she said. "I was handling it." "By complaining about it for 2 weeks? That's exactly what we mean," Emma jumped in. "You don't respect our right to handle our own problems, even if we don't handle them the way you would." David nodded sagely, like he was moderating a therapy session. "And Dad," Emma continued, "the money thing has to stop." "What money thing?" "You can't keep offering to pay for things or loan us money. It makes the relationship weird." This was surreal. They were angry at me for trying to help them financially? "So when you called me 6 weeks ago asking for money for your business," Emma's face reddened. "That was different." "How was it different?" "Because I asked. There's a difference between offering help when someone asks and constantly trying to fix things nobody asked you to fix." David was nodding along like this all made perfect sense. "Look, Harold, what the girls are trying to say is that they need space to live their adult lives without feeling like they have to manage your expectations and emotions." Manage my expectations and emotions? I was their father, not their patient. "I'm not sure I understand what you're asking me to do," I said carefully. Sarah sighed. "We're asking you to step back. Stop dropping by unannounced. Stop offering unsolicited advice. Stop trying to be involved in every aspect of our lives. We're asking you to treat us like the adults we are," Emma added. I sat there for a moment, processing what they were telling me. My daughters, who I'd raised from children, who I'd sacrificed everything for, were telling me I was too involved in their lives. "So you want me to, what? Pretend you're not my daughters?" "We want you to respect our independence," Sarah said. "We want you to stay out of our lives unless we specifically invite you in," Emma added. Stay out of their lives. Those words hit me like a physical blow. Stay out of their lives. The lives I'd helped build, the dreams I'd supported, the people I'd shaped from babies into women. I looked around the table at these 3 people, my 2 daughters and my son-in-law, who were sitting in judgment of me, who had decided without my input that I was too much, that my love was suffocating, that my involvement was unwanted. "Is this how you both feel?" I asked quietly. They both nodded. "We love you, Dad," Sarah said. "But we need boundaries. Love with conditions. Love with rules. Love with limitations." I stood up slowly. "I think I understand." "Good," David said, like we just resolved a business dispute. "This will be healthier for everyone." I walked to the door without another word. Behind me I heard Sarah say, "Dad, don't be dramatic. This is a good thing." Dramatic. Wanting to be part of my daughters' lives was dramatic. I drove home in a fog, their words echoing in my head. Stay out of our lives. Respect our independence. Stop inserting yourself. Manage your expectations and emotions. I sat in my living room for hours, staring at the family photos on the mantelpiece. Pictures of birthday parties, graduations, holidays, vacations. All the moments that made up our family history. In every single photo I was there. Present. Involved. Loving them. When had that become wrong? This morning I woke up feeling hollow. Like everything I'd built my life around had been stripped away. I wandered through the house, looking at all the reminders of the family I thought we were. Emma's artwork still hung in the hallway. Sarah's high school trophies still sat on the bookshelf. Their rooms upstairs were exactly as they'd left them when they moved out, because I'd kept them like shrines to my daughters. I was pathetic. A 68-year-old man living in the past, clinging to relationships that had outgrown me. That's when I decided to do something I'd been putting off for months. I went up to the attic to start sorting through old papers and documents. Maybe it was time to accept reality. Maybe it was time to start planning for the kind of future my daughters wanted. One where I stayed out of their lives. I pulled down boxes of tax returns, insurance papers, old bills. Decades of paperwork chronicling a life lived in service to my family. At the bottom of the third box, underneath a stack of report cards and school photos, I found something I'd forgotten about. The original deed to the house. I'd only looked at it once 37 years ago when we'd bought the place. Back then, Patricia and I had worked with a lawyer friend of her father's, a kind old man who'd insisted on adding some unusual language to the deed, for protection. I unfolded the yellow document and read it carefully for the first time in decades. This property belongs to Harold Johnson and his heirs, with Harold Johnson retaining primary residency rights in perpetuity, regardless of any future transfer of ownership or inheritance arrangements. I read it again and again. Primary residency rights in perpetuity. I'd forgotten about that clause entirely. Patricia's father had been worried about protecting family assets, and his lawyer friend had suggested language that would ensure I could never be forced out of my home, even if something happened to the ownership structure. My hands started shaking as I kept reading. Furthermore, Harold Johnson retains full decision-making authority over all property modifications, improvements, and usage arrangements during his lifetime. Full decision-making authority. During my lifetime. I kept reading. The legal language was dense, but the meaning became clearer with each paragraph. This wasn't just a deed. It was a trust arrangement. The house belonged to me and my heirs, but I retained ultimate control over everything related to the property as long as I was alive. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. I'd never transferred ownership to anyone. When the girls had moved out, when they'd gotten married, when they'd started their adult lives, the deed had remained in my name only. I'd always assumed that when I died, the house would go to them automatically. I'd never actually changed the ownership structure, which meant that right now, today, I was the sole owner of the house. My daughters weren't heirs yet. They were potential heirs. And according to this deed, I had complete control over who inherited what, when, and under what conditions. My daughters had just told me to stay out of their lives. They'd made it clear that they saw me as an intrusion, a burden, someone who needed to be managed and limited. They had no idea that the man they just dismissed controlled their future inheritance. I spent the rest of the morning reading every document in those boxes. Insurance papers, property tax records, improvement receipts. 37 years of homeownership, and every single document had my name on it. Just mine. I'd paid for everything. The down payment, the mortgage, the taxes, the repairs, the improvements. When Sarah had needed money for law school, I'd taken a second mortgage on this house. When Emma had needed startup capital, I'd refinanced and pulled equity out of this property. This house wasn't just where I lived. It was the foundation of everything I'd built for our family. And my daughters wanted me to stay out of their lives. The irony was almost funny. Almost. I made myself lunch and sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the backyard where I'd taught the girls to ride bikes, where we'd had countless barbecues, where they'd played for hours as children. This house held every memory we'd made as a family, and they wanted me to step back from their lives. That's when I made my decision. If my daughters wanted independence, if they wanted boundaries, if they wanted me to stay out of their lives, then they would get exactly what they asked for. I called my lawyer. Frank, it's Harold Johnson. I need to update my will and make some changes to my estate planning. Of course, Harold. What did you have in mind? I want to establish some conditions for inheritance. Some boundaries, you might say. We talked for an hour. Frank explained my options, the legal implications, the way trust structures could be modified. By the end of the conversation, I had a clear plan. My daughters wanted me to treat them like the independent adults they claimed to be. Adults who didn't need their father's involvement, advice, or support. Fine. Independent adults could inherit their father's estate the same way any other independent adults would, by earning it. I spent the afternoon drafting a letter. Not angry or vindictive, just clear and factual. A letter explaining the new boundaries I was establishing, in response to the boundaries they'd requested. The next morning, I drove to Frank's office and signed the paperwork. Then I went to the bank and made some arrangements. Finally, I stopped by a real estate agent's office and had an interesting conversation about property values and market conditions. By 3 o'clock, everything was in place. I drove home and sat in my living room, looking at those family photos again. But this time, instead of seeing the past, I was seeing the future. My daughters wanted space. They were about to get more space than they'd ever imagined. At exactly 4 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Sarah and Emma standing on my front porch, both looking uncomfortable. "Dad, we wanted to check on you," Sarah said. "You left kind of abruptly yesterday. We were worried about you," Emma added, though she couldn't quite meet my eyes. I smiled. "Come in, girls. I'm glad you're here. We need to talk." They followed me into the living room, and I could see them exchanging glances. They probably thought I was going to apologize, to promise to respect their boundaries, to agree to step back from their lives. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," I began. "And you're absolutely right." They both looked surprised. "You are adults. You deserve to be treated as independent people who can make their own decisions and solve their own problems." "We're glad you understand," Sarah said carefully. "Oh, I do understand. Completely. In fact, I've spent the day making some changes to reflect this new understanding." I pulled out the copies of the documents I'd signed. "First, I've updated my will. Since you're both independent adults who don't need your father's involvement in your lives, I've removed the automatic inheritance provisions." Emma frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means that instead of inheriting my estate automatically when I die, you'll need to earn it. Just like any other independent adult would." Sarah's face was getting pale. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "I've established a trust with specific conditions. If you want to inherit this house, or any other assets I've accumulated over my lifetime, you'll need to demonstrate that you've earned them." "Earned them how?" Emma asked. "Well, the trust requires evidence of a stable, respectful relationship with me for a minimum of 5 years prior to my death. Regular communication, holiday celebrations together, mutual support during difficult times. The kind of relationship most people have with their parents." They both stared at me. "But Dad," Sarah said slowly, "yesterday you agreed to respect our boundaries." "I am respecting your boundaries," I said. "You told me to stay out of your lives unless you specifically invite me in. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I won't call you, visit you, offer you advice, or try to help you with your problems unless you ask me to." That's what we wanted," Emma said, but she sounded uncertain. "Exactly. And since you're independent adults who don't need your father's support, you won't be inheriting your father's wealth automatically either. Fair is fair." The silence in the room was deafening. "There's more," I continued. "I've also made some other changes. The emergency contact information at my doctor's office, my employer, and my bank. I've removed your names. Since you want me to treat you like independent adults rather than my daughters, I can't list you as family contacts anymore." Sarah's mouth was opening and closing like a fish. "And I've updated my power of attorney documents. Instead of having you two make decisions for me if I become incapacitated, I've assigned that responsibility to my lawyer and my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson. Again, since you've made it clear you don't want to be involved in managing my life, I thought this would be more appropriate." Emma found her voice. "Dad, that's not. We didn't mean." "What didn't you mean?" "You told me very clearly that you wanted me to stay out of your lives. You said you needed space and independence. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for." "But we're still your daughters," Sarah said weakly. "Of course you are. I love you both dearly. But love doesn't entitle me to be involved in your lives, remember? You made that very clear. And by the same logic, being my daughters doesn't entitle you to inherit the wealth I've accumulated." David's voice came from behind them. I hadn't seen him come in. Harold, I think there's been a misunderstanding. When we talked about boundaries yesterday, there's no misunderstanding, David. You all made your positions very clear. You want me to step back, stop being involved, treat Sarah and Emma like independent adults rather than my children. So that's what I'm doing. But this is different, Emma said. This is about money. Is it different? You told me to stop offering financial help, remember? You said it made the relationship weird. Well, now there's no confusion about money at all. You're independent adults who will inherit nothing from me, unless you earn it by maintaining an actual relationship with me. The room was dead quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock Patricia and I had bought for our 10th anniversary. Dad, Sarah said slowly, if we wanted to fix this, what would we need to do? Fix what? There's nothing to fix. This is what you wanted. But if we wanted to have a relationship with you again, you're welcome to have a relationship with me anytime you want. But it will be a real relationship, not one where I'm kept at arm's length unless you need something. If you want me in your life, I'm all in. If you want me out of your life, I'm all out. Emma was starting to cry. Dad, we didn't mean we wanted you completely out of our lives. Then what did you mean? She couldn't answer that question. Let me explain something to you both, I said, sitting forward in my chair. For 37 years, I have centered my entire existence around being your father. I worked jobs I hated to pay for your education. I lived in a house that was too expensive so you could have good schools. I wore the same clothes for years so you could have new ones. I gave up vacations, hobbies, relationships, everything, so I could give you the best life possible. They were both crying now. And yesterday you told me that my love, my involvement, my care, all of it was too much. That I needed to step back and treat you like adults instead of my daughters. We didn't say stop loving us, Sarah whispered. You said stop acting like your father. That's not the same thing, isn't it? What does acting like a father mean if it doesn't mean being involved in your lives? What does parental love look like if it doesn't include caring about your problems, offering help, wanting to spend time with you? Neither of them could answer. So I've taken your advice. I'm treating you exactly like I would treat any other adults. Politely, respectfully, but without the special consideration I give to family members. David cleared his throat. Harold, maybe we can find a middle ground here. A middle ground? Like what? Well, maybe we were too harsh yesterday. Maybe we can work out some boundaries that work for everyone. You mean boundaries that let you keep me at a distance but still inherit my money? His face flushed. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant, David. You want me to be less of a father but still provide the benefits of being a father. Well, that's not how it works. I stood up and walked to the mantelpiece, picking up a photo of the girls from their high school graduation. I spent decades building something I thought was a family. A real family where we cared about each other, supported each other, stayed involved in each other's lives. That's what I thought we were. I set the photo down and turned back to them. But I was wrong. What we had was a dependency arrangement. You needed me to provide financial support, problem-solving, and emergency assistance. In return, you tolerated my presence in your lives. That's not true, Emma said. Isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you invited me to dinner without needing something? When was the last time you asked about my life, my health, my happiness? They couldn't answer because we all knew the answers. When I had my heart attack, you both visited me once, then went back to your busy adult lives. Do you know who checked on me every day during my recovery? Mrs. Peterson, my 74-year-old neighbor. She brought me meals, drove me to appointments, made sure I was taking my medication. Dad, we didn't know you needed. I shouldn't have to ask my daughters to care whether I live or die. The silence stretched out again. So here's where we stand, I continued. You wanted independence and now you have it. Complete independence. No more Dad inserting himself into your lives. No more unsolicited advice. No more emergency help. No more financial support. And no inheritance unless you decide you actually want a father, not just a bank account. Sarah was sobbing now. Dad, please. We made a mistake. Did you? Or are you just upset about the consequences? That stopped her cold. If I reversed all these changes right now, what would be different? Would you start calling me regularly? Would you include me in your lives? Would you stop seeing my love as a burden to be managed? She couldn't answer. The truth is, you're not upset about losing a father. You're upset about losing an inheritance. That's not fair, Emma said. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I spent my entire adult life sacrificing for you, only to be told I was too involved? Is it fair that I gave you everything I had, only to be asked to step back and give you space? Is it fair that I loved you unconditionally, only to have that love treated like an imposition? They were both crying, but I wasn't done. For 37 years I gave you everything. My time, my energy, my money, my love. Everything. And when I needed you most, when I was lying in that hospital bed wondering if I was going to die, you couldn't be bothered to stay for more than 20 minutes. Dad, let me finish. You taught me something yesterday. You taught me that being a devoted father isn't appreciated. It's resented. You taught me that sacrificial love is seen as codependency. You taught me that my involvement in your lives is an intrusion, not a blessing. I walked back to my chair and sat down. So I'm done. I'm done being the father who gives everything and gets nothing back. I'm done being the dad who's only welcome when you need something. I'm done pretending that we have a real relationship when what we actually have is a transaction. What can we do to fix this? Sarah asked desperately. You can't fix it. This isn't a problem to be solved. It's a consequence to be lived with. You made your choice yesterday. You chose independence over family. You chose boundaries over relationship. You chose to see your father as a burden rather than a blessing. But we love you, Emma said. Do you? Or do you love what I provide for you? She couldn't answer that question either. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm going to respect your wishes completely. I will not call you, visit you, or contact you in any way unless you specifically ask me to. I will not offer advice, help, or support unless you explicitly request it. I will treat you exactly like you asked to be treated, as independent adults who don't need their father's involvement. And if we want to rebuild? Sarah asked. Then you'll need to actually want it. Not because of money, not because of inheritance, not because you might need something someday. You'll need to want a relationship with me because you love me and value having me in your life. I pulled out 2 business cards and handed them to my daughters. That's my lawyer's contact information. If you decide you want to contest the will or challenge the trust provisions, you're welcome to try. But I should warn you. Everything I've done is completely legal and ironclad. They took the cards with shaking hands. And if you decide you want to have a real relationship with your father, you know where to find me. I'll be right here in the house I bought for our family, living the life you told me to live independently. I stood up and walked toward the front door. I think it's time for you to leave now. After all, you wouldn't want to impose on my independent adult life by staying too long. They followed me to the door, both crying, both looking lost. Dad, please, Emma said one more time. Please what? Please pretend yesterday didn't happen? Please go back to being the father you resented? Please continue to love you more than you love me. She had no answer. You got what you asked for, girls. Complete independence. I hope it makes you happy. I closed the door behind them and listened to their footsteps on the front porch, their quiet voices discussing something I couldn't hear, the sound of car doors closing and engines starting. Then silence. I walked back to the living room and sat in my chair, looking at those family photos again. But this time I wasn't seeing the past or the future. I was seeing the present. An old man, alone in his house, finally understanding the difference between being loved and being needed. The truth was, I felt lighter than I had in years. For decades I'd carried the weight of their problems, their needs, their expectations. I'd lived my life in service to people who saw that service as an obligation rather than a gift. Now, for the first time since Patricia died, I was truly free. Free to live for myself. Free to spend my money on things I wanted. Free to make friends who actually enjoyed my company. Free to date, travel, pursue hobbies. All the things I'd given up to be a devoted father. The phone rang an hour later. Sarah's number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again 10 minutes later. Emma's number. Voicemail again. By evening I had 17 missed calls and 12 voicemail messages. I didn't listen to any of them. The next morning, Sarah was on my porch at 8 a.m., looking like she hadn't slept. Dad, we need to talk. Do we? Yesterday you made it very clear that you needed space. I made a mistake. We made a mistake. What mistake was that? We took you for granted. We didn't appreciate everything you've done for us. And what changed your mind? Was it the inheritance clause? The power of attorney change? The emergency contact removal? Her face told me everything I needed to know. Sarah, let me ask you something. If I hadn't changed my will yesterday, if I hadn't modified the trust, if I hadn't removed you as my emergency contacts, would you be standing on my porch right now? She tried to answer, but we both knew the truth. That's what I thought. Dad, that's not fair. The money isn't. The money isn't what? Important? The first thing you asked about yesterday was what you'd need to do to fix this. Not how to rebuild our relationship, not how to show me you loved me, but how to fix the inheritance situation. That's not. I mean. Sarah, go home. Think about what you actually want. Do you want a father in your life? Or do you want access to your father's money? Because you can't have both unless the first one is genuinely true. She started crying again. I do want you in my life, Dad. Then prove it. And not because of money or inheritance or anything else. Prove it because you love me. How? Figure it out. You're an independent adult, remember? You shouldn't need your father telling you how to love him. I closed the door again. The calls continued for 3 days. Voicemails from both daughters, texts, emails. David even showed up once, but I pretended I wasn't home. On the 4th day, the calls stopped. I thought that was the end of it. I thought they'd accepted the new reality and moved on with their independent adult lives. I was wrong. A week later, Emma appeared at my door with a casserole dish and a hesitant smile. I brought dinner, she said. I made your favorite tuna noodle casserole. I hadn't eaten tuna noodle casserole in years. Emma hadn't cooked for me since she was in high school. Why? I asked. Because I wanted to. Because I miss cooking with you. You miss cooking with me? Or you miss the inheritance? Her face crumpled. Dad, I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But I really do miss you. Emma, what's different now than it was 2 weeks ago? What's changed besides the will? I've been thinking about what you said. About when I actually call you, when I actually want to spend time with you. And you're right. I only called when I needed something. So what's different now? Now I need something different. I need my dad. That was the first honest thing any of them had said to me in years. Come in, I said. We ate dinner together. Really ate together, not just sitting at the same table while checking phones or thinking about other things. We talked about her business, but not about money or problems. We talked about her relationship with Marcus, her hopes for the future, her memories of growing up in this house. When she got ready to leave, she hugged me. Really hugged me. Not one of those quick, obligatory embraces we'd been exchanging for years. Dad, I know I don't deserve it, but could we try again? Could I try to be a better daughter? What does that look like, Emma? I don't know. But I want to figure it out. Why now? Because I realized something this week. When I thought about you not being in my life anymore, really not being in my life, I wasn't worried about the money. I was scared that I'd lost you. That I'd thrown away the best relationship I had because I was too stupid and selfish to appreciate it. And if there was no inheritance involved? If I was broke and had nothing to leave you? Then I'd want to have a relationship with you because you're my dad and I love you. She was crying, but these tears felt different from the ones she'd cried a week earlier. Emma, if we're going to rebuild this relationship, it has to be real. It can't be about what I can do for you or give you. It has to be about who we are to each other. I understand. Do you? Because for the past 5 years I've been your emergency contact, your bank account, and your handyman. I haven't been your father. Can you love me without needing me to be useful to you? Yes. I want to try. I want to learn how to love you better. That night I called Frank and made a small change to the trust. Emma was still required to demonstrate 5 years of genuine relationship before inheriting anything. But I added a provision that would allow me to modify those terms if I saw real evidence of change. Sarah took longer. 2 more weeks passed before she contacted me. And when she did, it was through a letter delivered by hand. Dad, the letter read, I know I've messed up everything between us, and I know that showing up at your door hasn't worked. So I'm writing instead, because I need you to hear me without interrupting or walking away. You were right about everything. I have been treating you like an obligation instead of my father. I have been taking your love for granted. I have been keeping you at a distance while expecting you to be available whenever I needed something. I could tell you that David influenced me, or that I was just trying to establish healthy adult boundaries, or that I didn't realize what I was doing. But the truth is simpler than that. I was being selfish and ungrateful. I don't know if you can forgive me. I don't know if we can fix what I broke. But I want you to know that losing you has been the worst thing that's ever happened to me, and it had nothing to do with money or inheritance. I miss talking to you. I miss your advice, even when I didn't want to hear it. I miss knowing that no matter what happened, my dad would be there to help me figure it out. I miss being your daughter. If you're willing to try again, I promise to do better. I promise to call you just to talk. I promise to include you in my life because I want you there, not because I have to. I promise to show you the respect and love you deserve. And if you're not willing to try again, I understand. But I needed you to know that I realize what I lost, and it wasn't an inheritance. It was my father. Love, Sarah. I left David. Not because of this situation, but because going through this made me realize that anyone who would encourage me to push away someone who loves me that much isn't someone I want to be married to. I read that letter 5 times before I called her. Sarah. Dad. Her voice was so hopeful it broke my heart. Come home. She was at my house in 20 minutes, and we talked until 3 in the morning. Really talked about her marriage, her fears, her regrets, her hopes. About how she'd felt growing up with so much pressure to be perfect, how she'd mistaken my high expectations for disappointment, how she'd gradually pulled away because she was afraid of letting me down. I never wanted you to be perfect, I told her. I wanted you to be happy. I know that now. But when I was younger, it felt like love came with conditions. Like I had to earn it by being successful and independent. Love doesn't have conditions, Sarah. But relationships do have requirements. What do you mean? I will always love you no matter what. But having a relationship with me requires that you actually want me in your life. It requires effort and time and genuine caring. I do want you in my life, Dad. Really want you there. Then we'll figure this out together. It's been 6 months since that night when my daughters told me to stay out of their lives. 6 months since I discovered that deed in my attic and realized I had options they'd never considered. Both of my daughters have kept their promises. Emma calls me twice a week just to talk. She brings Marcus over for dinner every Sunday, and we've actually become friends. She asks my advice about her business, but she also asks about my life, my health, my plans for the future. Sarah has moved back home temporarily while she sorts out her divorce. At first, I was worried it would be awkward, but it's been wonderful. We've had time to really get to know each other as adults, to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect rather than obligation. She's started dating someone new. A kind man who actually encourages her relationship with me, rather than seeing it as competition. And she's found a new job that makes her happy instead of just successful. 3 months ago, I modified the trust again. Both of my daughters will inherit my estate when I die, not because they've met some arbitrary conditions, but because they've shown me that they love me for who I am, not what I can provide. But more importantly, I'm not just living for them anymore. I've started dating a lovely woman named Carol who I met at the community center. I've taken up woodworking and joined a men's group at church. I've traveled to places I'd always wanted to see but never had time for. I'm still their father, but I'm also Harold Johnson, a man with his own interests, dreams, and relationships. The house still holds all our family memories, but now it's also the place where I'm building a new life for myself. Emma and Sarah are part of that life, but they're not the whole thing. Last week, Emma asked me something that showed how much things have changed. Dad, are you happy? Not are you okay? Or do you need anything? But are you happy? Yes, sweetheart. For the first time in years, I'm really happy. Good. You deserve to be happy. That's when I knew we'd really turned the corner. My daughters don't just love me now. They want me to be happy. They want good things for me, not just from me. Sarah asked me something similar a few days later. Dad, what do you want for your 70th birthday? What did I want? 4 years, all I'd wanted was to be needed by my daughters. Now I wanted something different. I want to have a party, I said. I want to invite my friends and neighbors and the people I care about. I want to celebrate being 70 years old and still here to enjoy it. That sounds perfect. Can we help plan it? I'd love that. So we're planning a party together. Not because I need their help, but because we enjoy doing things together. Because we're family, and that's what families do. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the way I handled things last spring. They think I was too harsh, too dramatic, too willing to throw away my relationships with my daughters over a disagreement about boundaries. But I don't see it that way. I didn't throw away those relationships. I saved them. For years, we'd had fake relationships built on dependency and obligation. I was the giver, they were the takers, and we all pretended that was love. But real love requires reciprocity. Real relationships require both people to show up, to care, to make an effort. When my daughters told me to stay out of their lives, they inadvertently gave me permission to discover who I was beyond being their father. And when I changed my will and established those trust conditions, I forced them to examine what they actually wanted from our relationship. It turned out that once the financial safety net was gone, once they couldn't take my love and support for granted, they realized they genuinely missed me. Not my money, not my help, not my services, but me. That's the difference between being needed and being loved. When someone needs you, they resent your absence because it inconveniences them. When someone loves you, they miss your presence because life is better with you in it. My daughters love me now in a way they never did before. And I love them too, but in a healthier way. I'm proud of who they're becoming, not just what they achieve. I enjoy their company, not just their success. I want them to be happy, not just grateful. The deed that started this whole transformation is still in my desk drawer, but I rarely look at it anymore. Not because it's not important, but because I don't need the reminder of my legal rights. My daughters respect my place in their lives because they want to, not because they have to. And that makes all the difference. I'm 70 years old next month, and I'm finally living the life I always dreamed of, surrounded by people who love me for who I am, engaged in activities that bring me joy, secure in the knowledge that I matter to the people who matter to me. When I signed over my house to my daughters in my original will, I thought I was securing their futures. When I changed that will 6 months ago, I thought I was teaching them a lesson about consequences. But what I actually did was something much more important. I walked back into my own life and changed everything. I stopped being just a father and became a whole person again. I stopped accepting scraps of attention and demanded real relationship. I stopped giving everything and started receiving something in return. My daughters said, "Stay out of our lives." I walked back into my own house, literally and figuratively, and discovered that the life I'd been living in service to others had room for me too. The best part is that now, when my daughters visit, when we have dinner together, when we talk on the phone, I know they're there because they want to be. Not because they need something, not because they feel obligated, but because they enjoy being with me. That's worth more than any inheritance. That's worth more than any deed or trust or legal arrangement. That's what real family feels like. And it only took me 68 years to figure it out.